CNN has learned that Manhattan prosecutors have told at least one witness to prepare for grand jury testimony, a sign their already lengthy probe is heating up. Let's discuss with CNN senior legal analyst and former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, Preet Bharara. Preet, always great to see you. Help us put this into perspective. How big of a deal is this, do you think?
Well, look, it must have been the case that the grand jury was used for some things, including the issuance of grand jury subpoenas. That's how those tax returns that were much battled over went all the way up to the Supreme Court. That's how they were sought. But I think this new phase of according to the reporting, of a special grand jury, the specificity with which there's been reporting, that it's 3 times a week, and as you just suggested a moment ago, that a particular identifiable witness has been asked to prepare for grand jury testimony. That means, based on my experience and the experience of people who've been in that office, that there is a substantial likelihood that that grand jury will be asked to consider charges. We don't know yet whether it will be charges against the former president himself. But given some of the indicia we've seen, including the hiring of an outside lawyer to come into the DA's office who has experience on the defense side and the prosecution side, Mark Pomerantz, and a number of other signs, including the fact that Cy Vance is not seeking re-election, the primary to replace him is in just 3 weeks. It all has the look of an advanced phase and a point at which Cy Vance wants to himself make the determination about whether there will be charges or not, and not leave that to his successor.
And when do you expect we will learn more about this grand jury proceeding? And they're usually cloaked in secrecy. Sometimes you get little tidbits that leak out. And what could be possibly on the horizon?
Well, I mean, we're not supposed to hear anything about the grand jury.
Yeah.
The grand jurors themselves are admonished from speaking about it. The prosecutors are. But as people may not appreciate, witnesses and lawyers for witnesses can tell people that they've been called to the grand jury. So, depending on the standing of particular people who are being interviewed or who are being called to testify or being asked for documents, depending on where they stand on the issue, they might be coming forward and speaking, for the same reason that we found out about this one witness. I think we'll probably be hearing about other witnesses coming in, not necessarily sure what they're saying, not necessarily sure of what the charges might be. That's left for you and me and people like us to speculate about.
And apparently some faulty redactions in a new court filing in the investigation into Trump's ex-lawyer Rudy Giuliani show federal investigators seized more than just electronic devices in the raids at Giuliani's office. Prosecutors are looking into whether Giuliani violated lobbying laws connected to his work in Ukraine. What comes to mind when you hear that?
Well, that's another example of, it's a different office, my former office, the Southern District of New York. It is not dispositive that they searched and seized, a number of devices. It doesn't mean that their charge will be forthcoming. There are searches that happen in significant cases and no charges end up being filed. Again, though, given the status of Rudy Giuliani, both as the leader of that office for a number of years before I was there, and as the former lawyer to the President of the United States, it seems like you don't take an aggressive move like that, especially when you've been conducting the investigation for some time, and you have a lot of documents and toll records and communications based on searches that you did before that Rudy Giuliani and his lawyers are challenging. So you have a bunch of stuff. You're seeking another bunch of stuff. You know it will be a big deal. You know that Rudy Giuliani will make a big deal out of it. You know now that his son is running for governor and is making this a point in his campaign as governor, I presume, right, that you don't take that action unless you have some serious, I think, intent that you will have a case to bring. Again, doesn't mean, with all due caveats, doesn't mean that will happen, but it's a very, very substantial step to take in this kind of circumstance without having some idea that the likelihood of charging is relatively high.
And let me ask you, after Senate Republicans voted down a bill that would set up a 9/11 style commission into what happened on January 6th, let's listen to what Republican Congressman Michael McCall said earlier today on CNN.
Well, it was a dark day in American history. As you know, I voted for certification. It was my constitutional duty once the states certified the ballots. But I also, at that time, in the aftermath, was the first one to call for a DOJ investigation into this. And you know what, Jake, that happened. In essence, I view this not as an overview of policy like the 9/11 Commission did. It's a criminal investigation, a criminal case.
What do you think, Preet? Is January 6th more of a criminal investigation than an investigation that should be conducted by a 9/11 style commission?
Well, you can have both. You know, they're not mutually exclusive, as the congressman well knows, and it seems like he's towing a party line now because people don't want a full congressional investigation. There have been a lot of events in our history, recent and in the past, and not so recent, where there are criminal prosecutions pursued, but also congressional inquiry because there's some things criminal prosecutions can't do. For example, 9/11. You had a 9/11 commission, and then you've had other kinds of proceedings. Once upon a time, when I began as U.S. attorney, the trial of the 5 people at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, was going to happen in my district. That was left to a military tribunal, and it hasn't happened yet. That's this whole separate story. We could do a whole other episode on that.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's a criminal process, and then there's a congressional process, and it's happened time and again. Criminal prosecutions don't yield reports. Criminal prosecutions don't yield, action items. Criminal prosecutions only yield criminal charges where warranted. There might be lots of other folks and systems and practices that deserve to be judged and people held accountable in the public eye, but not necessarily criminally prosecuted. And you don't get prosecutors don't bring criminal cases and suggest reforms and recommendations like the 9/11 Commission did. So, the idea that this only can be a criminal investigation, even though it's large in size and scope, doesn't make any sense. And the congressman, I think, probably knows that.
And you have to wonder whether some of the same people who tried to shut down a January 6th commission would also seek to shut down some kind of criminal investigation as well. I mean, there are just some people out there who don't want to get to the bottom of this. Preet Bharara, thanks so much for your insights as always. We